Alright, I'm just going to nip this right in the bud so none of you jokester assholes mention it. The two-man power trip is not on this list. The liter-battering, quad-tearing twosome may have been all about the power in front of the crowd, but this list is about power trips in real life, behind the camera and dodgy dealings in a squared circle. There have been some shocking abuses of power in Vince's meaner CENA arena, with careers and livelihoods often treated as second place to the almighty ego. I'm Adam from WhatCulture.com, and here are the 10 biggest power trips in WWE history. Number 10. Stephanie McMahon, worst heel ever. Oh, she's just the worst. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the billion-dollar princess isn't a talented heel. She's good on the mic and has delivered a bunch of belting promos in her time. The ones at WrestleMania 31 and 32 were especially good. It's just that most of the time, her heel persona seems to be all about making herself seem badass at the expense of the wrestlers around her. So she's a heel, right? So she's mean and cruel to faces, right? That makes sense because when they overcome the odds, they foiled her. Hooray! So why does she spend so much time being dicks to heels? Why did she chew out mega heel Charlotte backstage? Why did she emasculate Sheamus for turning his back on her? Why did she take every single opportunity to talk down to Seth Rollins? What purpose does any of this serve other than diminishing the heels and making Steph look awesome? Awful, awful, awful. Number 9. John Cena rewrites SummerSlam. The 2010 edition of SummerSlam has gained notoriety as being one of the most bungled main events in recent history. The Nexus, which is what happens when a treehouse club gets seriously out of hand, were white hot, threatening to bring all of WWE down, when of course they were booked to lose to John Cena and Team WWE at SummerSlam. That was the decision of WWE management, but hey, there are ways to look strong in defeat, right? Haha, not this time, buckaroo! Cena had a very specific thing in mind for the finish of that match. He was going to take a DDT on exposed concrete and then come back to beat the final two Nexus members because hibbledy-bibbledy-poopity-poppity-plops. Edge and Jericho tried to tell him that it was a bad idea, but Superman is as Superman does, and the nonsense finish went ahead, making the Nexus look like chumps, with even Johnny Boy admitting later that it was a bad move. Number 8. Triple H crushes Booker T at Mania. We've discussed this angle at length and its rather salty overtones of racism, but regardless of whether or not you hold the opinion that Triple H throwing money at a black man to fetch him a towel is troubling, and it is, you can't deny that the way the angle ended was a gigantic and unnecessary power play. See, not only did Triple H strong-arm creative into changing it so that Booker T's road to redemption ended in defeat, but during the match itself at WrestleMania 19, Trips hit the pedigree and then stalled. Seriously, he didn't pin Booker T for, no kidding, 20 whole seconds, very slowly crawling over to him, and even then he laid just one arm across him. See, stuff like that matters. If you leave a long enough pause after a finisher, the fans are hardwired to accept, oh, he's going to kick out of that, that's okay. And when Booker T didn't kick out, it made him look super weak, resulting in the whole angle being one long power play for the cerebral assassin. Number 7. Jeff Jarrett holds Vince to ransom. Vince McMahon is not a fan of Double J. I mean, he made that fairly clear when he fired the man live on TV after buying WCW. Why the animosity? Well, it boils down to the time that Jer held up Vinnie Mac for a giant payday in 1999. Jeff was on his way out of the company, his contract expired just before No Mercy 99, he was heading to WCW. The problem was, he was Intercontinental Champion at the time, and Vince wanted CHYNA to best him for the belt in a good housekeeping match, which is basically a hardcore match featuring brooms and pies and kitchen sinks because girls and stuff. It was a climax of a big angle about Jarrett hating women in wrestling, and it would culminate at No Mercy. Because he was out of contract at the time, WWE would have to pay Jarrett an extension fee, and according to sources like Jim Ross, Jarrett held the company to ransom, forcing him to pay him $300,000 for one match. Damn. Still, revenge is best served cold. Vince. Number 6. Shawn Michaels beats Davey Boy. This one is just really sad, to be honest. The European title was essentially created for the British Bulldog, who won the now retired strap in a tournament culminating in Germany in early '97. Bulldog held the belt until September and the one-night-only pay-per-view emanating from Birmingham, England. The show was pretty much dedicated to Bulldog, opening with a loving tribute to the man, and his European title match against Shawn Michaels went on last over the WWF title. Before the match, Bulldog was assured that he was winning the match, so he told the press that he was dedicating the match to his sister, who was battling cancer. At the last minute, Shawn Michaels got in Vince's ear and convinced him to go with the whole HBK winning the Grand Slam angle, switching the finish to Michaels beating Bulldog at the last minute, greatly upsetting not just Davey Boy, but his sister, who was battling cancer for sake. Number 5. CHYNA gets Miss Kitty fired. Shortly after No Way Out in 2001, Stacey the Cat Miss Kitty Carter was fired by the WWF. Her then husband and friend of the puppies everywhere, Jerry Lawler, elected to walk out with her, leaving the company it served since 1993. Reports suggested that Carter was difficult to deal with. In a shoot interview taped shortly after his departure from the promotion, Lawler refuted those claims, even though, well, I mean, he just quit for her, so he probably would say that. Interestingly though, the King then went on to hint that none other than CHYNA was actually involved in Carter's sacking. Previously, Miss Kitty had played valet to CHYNA, and they were both involved in a feud with the Right to Censor group. According to Lawler, CHYNA wasn't a huge fan of Stacey Carter and wanted her gone. As she was still a powerful member of the WWF locker room at that point, she got what she wanted, and Miss Kitty was shown the door, or rather, the cap flap at the bottom of the door. Oh, f you. Number 4, Ultimate Warrior nearly ruins SummerSlam. We've mentioned this before, but you can't do a list about gigantic power trips without including the time that Ultimate Warrior threatened to no-show SummerSlam 1991 until he was paid the money he believed was owed to him. Warrior had been deeply unsatisfied with his pay for WrestleMania 7 when he and Savage stole the show in a career-threatening match. He demanded the same amount of money as Hulk Hogan, who had wrestled in the main event. That and a laundry list of other demands were delivered to Vince McMahon, with Warrior threatening to walk out if they weren't met, crippling the upcoming SummerSlam main event of him and Hogan fighting the Triangle of Terror. Few power plays are as grand as holding the second biggest pay-per-view of the year hostage, and Vince paid the Warrior before immediately suspending him as soon as SummerSlam was over. Number 3, Hulk Hogan's 1993. The ultimate power player, so much so that if you look up power trip in the dictionary, you won't find a picture of Hulk Hogan because he had a discreet word with the people who wrote the dictionary. The Hulkster's creative control exploits are legendary in WCW, but in WWE there were a few notable examples. None more so than throughout the first half of 1993. After taking time off in the midst of the steroid scandal, the Hulkster returned before WrestleMania 9. During the main event of that show, WWF champion Bret Hart was scheduled to lose to Yokozuna. Believing the fans would hate the sour ending, Hogan convinced McMahon to change it. Not for Hart to go over instead. No! The Hulkster challenged Yokozuna after the match, instead beating him instantly to claim the belt as Hart slinked away forgotten from his first ever WrestleMania main event. Hogan's brief run in the company during 1993 was scheduled to end at SummerSlam with him dropping the belt finally to Hart, passing the torch and then leaving to do excellent movies. He refused, dropping the belt to Yokozuna dirty instead at King of the Ring, and skipped SummerSlam entirely. Number 2, Bret Hart refuses to lose to HBK. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. There was only room for one of them in the WWF. In 1997, both men were being pushed as twin faces of the company. Backstage, they loathed each other, with well-documented dickheadery leading to a locker room brawl resulting in Hart ripping out a clump of Michaels' hair. Despite temporarily mending bridges, it came time for Hart to leave WWF to pastures richer at WCW in November, and to his credit, Hart told Shawn he was willing to drop the belt to him, to which Shawn responded, "Thanks, but I'd never do the same for you." It was an act of disrespect that Hart found unforgivable, and exercised a creative control in his contract in order to nix any and all plans for him to ever drop the belt to Shawn Michaels. People are divided in whether Bret was right. After all, what's more important, the tradition of doing right by the company on your way out, or the tradition of respect? Regardless, it's one of the most infamous power plays in the history of wrestling. Backed into a corner, McMahon did the only thing he felt he could, the Montreal Screwjob. And if you don't know what that is, I hate you. And number 1, the McMahon family dominates the invasion. Oh, it was always going to be a McMahon in the top spot, wasn't it? Fun fact, you can't spell huge power trip without Vince McMahon has gone on a huge power trip. Try it with a pen and paper. See, you can't do it. So the invasion, probably the biggest missed opportunity in wrestling. What could have been Bischoff versus McMahon, Sting versus Taker, Austin versus Goldberg, The Rock versus Flair, all that jazz, if they just waited. Instead, what happened was a mismatched mess, which made the WCW crew look like jokers, and worse, put the McMahon family front and center. WCW and ECW fighting WWF should have been the biggest thing in existence, led by charismatic showmen Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman. Nope, how about Shane and Steph? Why? Because f*** you, that's why McMahon's forever hooray. Turning the single most high-profile and consequential war in the history of wrestling into an internal family squabble is the most egregious power trip in wrestling, bar none. And that's our list. Did we miss any out? Tell us about it in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter here. I'm Adam from WhatCulture.com, and I'll see you soon.
This Saturday on an all-new episode of WCPW Loaded, making his WCPW debut and first televised appearance since leaving the WWE, the two-time WWE champion, Alberto El Patron. All this and more Saturday, 8 p.m., 3 p.m. Eastern, only on WhatCulture Wrestling.